Welcome to our webinar. This is Dave from examPAL. We're going to start in just a second. But before we do, I want to make sure you guys can actually hear me so that I won't be just talking to myself. So if you guys can hear me, then on the right side of your screen, there's a chat pod. And if any one of you guys could just write in there that you can hear me all right, that would be great. And then we can actually get started. Okay, thank you, Brett. That's good to know. Okay, fantastic. So nice to meet you guys. As I said, my name is Dave. I'm a tutor here at examPAL. And today I'm going to talk with you guys about the winning strategy to get a 700 plus score on the GMAT. And then afterwards, I'm going to hand it off to my friends Doris and Colin from Admissionado. And they're going to talk about admissions, naturally. So we have half an hour with me and half an hour with them. There's a lot to pack into half an hour. So I'm just going to get started. Before I do, I want to tell you guys thank you already for being with us today. And we have a special offer for you guys. 30% off on any of our GMAT courses. And to take us up on that, all you have to do is go to examPAL.com. And if you've signed up for today's webinar, then you will be able to get this offer. So without further ado, let's start talking about what we came here to talk about, which is the winning strategy to get 700 plus. By the way, I'm just going to say right off the bat, if you guys have any questions, I'm going to be talking kind of quickly, but do ask them, and either I'll answer them while I'm going now, or in the second half I can answer them in writing. But use the chat; it's there for you guys. So let's hop in. So I don't know about you guys, but from our experience in examPAL as tutors, what we've realized is that a lot of students are frustrated with their GMAT studies. And they're frustrated for all kinds of reasons. They're frustrated because they're paying too much and they're doing it for the wrong product. And why is that? Well, for one thing, we think that many of the GMAT courses out there teach you one way to solve a question, while in fact there are many ways to solve each question on the GMAT. And if you just teach a one size fits all, then how are you going to teach the best way for you? Another thing is that most GMAT courses, again, are one size fits all. They teach you kind of how to go through the question in the most precise and accurate way, but not necessarily in the most time efficient way. And time, as you guys, those of you that have already started studying know, is the most important and challenging factor on the GMAT. And that really has to be kind of at the heart and center of a course, in our opinion. And finally, a lot of these courses are very time consuming. The reason being that they teach you everything. Teach you all, for every subject, they teach you all levels of knowledge, and they give you practice questions that are for all levels of students, again, because it's one size fits all. And that's a waste of time because you're spending time studying, working on questions that are way too easy for you and you don't learn anything from. And maybe you're spending time working on questions that are more advanced than where you are at the moment, and you're just going to get frustrated and you're not learning anything from that either. So the bottom line from what we is that we've developed a course, examPAL, which is about studying the way that you as students think, studying the effectiveness of the methods that you use, and finding the fastest ways to solve each question. And at the heart of this is an insight we have about what the GMAT is all about. And so as I just said, it's not about knowledge, right? It's not a test where you have to learn new things. Actually, in fact, it's all things you've already learned in high school. And it's not about intelligence in our opinion either. I mean, obviously intelligence plays a role, but more than that, GMAT is a skill. And at the heart of the skill, what GMAT is really about, we call cognitive flexibility. Okay, and what is cognitive flexibility? It's your ability to quickly find the fastest way to tackle each question and apply it. We have 2 minutes to solve each question, and that includes the time that it takes us to read it, understand how we're going to solve it, and then obviously go ahead and solve it. And what I'm going to talk about for much of the next half hour is that we're not always correct in our instincts of how we're solving questions, and it's very much worth focusing on this aspect of our test study. So just really quick in what our examPAL course is actually about. So when we teach you the information, when we teach you the GMAT, we start with interactive lessons, video lessons for each and every topic. Starts with a video teaser, and then we move on to a more hands-on lesson about different questions and how we can solve them with different approaches. We move on to practice, in which we teach you a few different ways, tools to solve each and every kind of topic on the test. And then we combine both information that we have from all of our thousands of students from over 100 countries of how they solve the question, together with data we collect on you during your practice on how you solve the question, to give you a recommendation for the way we recommend to solve the question. Now, at the heart of these recommendations is an insight that we have that's at the heart of our course, which is that there are many, many ways to solve each question, but there are 3 major strategies, and we call them precise, alternative, and logical, right? Which is the PAL in examPAL. So just for an example, the question that's on the screen now for every positive x and y, 3x plus 2y is between. So the logical way to solve this question would be, without doing any calculations, would be just to say, well, if we're only looking at the y's, so it's 2y over y, and that's 2. If we only look at the x, then it's 3x over x, and that's 3. So it has to be something between 2 and 3, and that's the answer. We can solve this question precisely by just going ahead and simplifying this fraction, moving things around, and finally getting, seeing with our eyes, actually seeing that it has to be larger than 2 and it has to be smaller than 3. And we can solve it in a way that we call alternative, which is all about getting shortcuts and getting to the answer as quickly as possible. In this case, by plugging in numbers, by saying, I don't know what x or y are, but let's pretend for a second we don't actually have any constraints, because we know this question is for every positive x and y. So let's decide for ourselves what they are. Let's say that they're both equal 1, and then we can go ahead, plug 1 in, we can see that 3x plus 2y over x plus y equals 3 plus 2 over 1 plus 1, which is 5 over 2, which is between 2 and 3. So that's just a really quick, off the top of my head primer on what the 3 PAL strategies look like. Am I clear so far? Guys, tell me if you have any questions. In fact, I'd even love if one of you guys could tell me once again that you can hear me. I just kind of want to check every few minutes or so, because it's happened to me before that suddenly the connection has stopped in the middle, and I was very sad. So anyway, the PALgorithm that we have is about finding the most efficient of the 3 strategies for you at the level of each and every question throughout the test. That's what we work on, and that's what our course is about. And that's what I want to talk with you guys about now. So I hope that kind of my quick overview and what's now on the screen about what precise, alternative, and logical are about in general, just in one sentence. Precise is about solving things the straightforward way, and it's probably going to be the most, the one that's we're most used to already from our studies. Alternative is about using shortcuts, and logical is about using logical cues to cut through the question quicker. I'm wondering if you guys can hear me well, because no one's told me in the chat. So if you guys can say, Adriana, that's great. If anyone else, any other students, that would be great. I apologize for going on about this. But anyway, okay, I see lots of you are typing now, so that's great. Thank you, Mamkul. Okay, so now without further ado, enough general abstract talk. Let's look at what this actually looks like in practice. So on your screen, thank you, Omami, thank you, Brett. On the screen now we have a question. And what I want you guys to do is not to solve the question, which may be your instinct. What I want you guys to do is to read the question and think, how should I solve the question? Should I solve it precisely? Should I solve it alternatively? Or should I solve it logically? Precise, alternative, logical. Of the 900 guests that attended a wedding, 36% were women. If 450 men left the wedding, the women would be what percentage of the remaining guests? And in fact, I'm going to now ask you guys to fill in a poll about this question and tell me how you think we should solve it. Precise, alternative, logical, or can't tell. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, well, wait a minute, Dave, we didn't really have a lot of time to look at this question and really immerse ourselves in and understand the depths of what it's asking us, that's kind of the point. Because on the GMAT, you don't have that kind of time, right? On the GMAT, you have to make a very quick 15 to 20 second decision about how you're going to approach this question before you do. Okay, I see quite a few of you have voted, and I'm going to wrap it up in just a few seconds. Interesting findings so far. I admit I'm a bit surprised, and I'm going to share with you guys why I'm surprised. So you should now be seeing the results on your screen, and most of you think it's logical, which is interesting, and I'm going to get in a minute to why that's interesting. But now let's actually go to the question. Okay, so first of all, one of you guys voted for precise. Whoever that was, you definitely weren't wrong, okay? Because this question can be solved precisely. In fact, I'll go a little bit further and I'll say most quant questions can be solved precisely. There aren't that many that can't be solved precisely at all. How will we do it here? Well, we'd say 36% are women, so how much is 36% of 900? Well, it's 36 over 100 times 900. By the way, guys, I'm going to do this pretty quickly. If you can't keep up, no worries, because the point is really just to understand kind of the point of what I'm saying and not the details of the question. And anyway, there will be a recording of this later. So if you want to go back and really follow the calculations a little bit more carefully, you can do that. Anyway, so we go 36 over 100 times 900, and then we can simplify by 100. We get to 36 over 9, which we can then, if we don't know how to do that, then we can turn that into 36 times 10 minus 1, which is 360 minus 36, which gives us 324. And that's just the number of women in the wedding. Now we have to figure out what percentage they are of the remaining guests. The remaining guests are 900 guests minus 450 guests. So that's 450 remaining guests. Finally, the fraction we're looking at is 324 over 450. That's not enough, though. We need to get this in a percentage. So we're going to simplify some more. We can simplify by 3, get this. Then we can divide that by 3 again, get 36 over 50, multiply that by 2, and finally end up with 72 over 100, which is 72%. Answer choice D. Okay, I'm a little bit out of breath because precise is possible. And for those of you that are very good with calculations, maybe it's the way to go in this question. Maybe it is. But notice that was quite a few calculations. I did them pretty quickly now. I imagine for most of us it would take a little bit longer to actually write them down or do them in our head. And it takes some work. So what I want to show you now is that in this case, precise works, but it might not be the most efficient. And now the vast majority of you guys that voted for logical were onto something, okay? And let's see how that would actually look like, though. By the way, I'm very impressed with you guys because normally that's not the case. Normally, most students think that precise is the way to go just because that's what we're kind of used to. So from school, from university, from whatever it is, solving things in a straightforward way is really what we've been trained to do. And you guys were smarter than that, so I guess we're a smart batch here. Anyway, so what does it actually look like using the logical approach? Well, we know what is a percentage, right? Percentage is part over a whole. It's a fraction. In this case, it's a fraction of women out of all of the guests. So now, what do we know? We know that in the beginning, there was 36%. And then what changed? The women didn't change at all. It's the same number of women, whereas the guests halved, right? And became half of what it was. Now, what happens if the numerator doesn't change, but the denominator becomes smaller by half? So if the denominator becomes smaller by half, that's the exact same as multiplying the whole fraction by 2. Meaning we have twice the percentage, so 72%. And notice we didn't have to do almost any calculations here. 36 times 2 was the only calculation we had to do. So if we understand what this question is actually asking us, this is a good example of a question in which the logical approach is really very efficient. And in fact, from our data from this actual question, we know that on average, people that used the logical approach solved it in 110 seconds, which is just under where we want to be in the quant section. Whereas people that used the precise approach maybe got it right, but it took them 2.5 minutes, which is about half a minute longer than we want to be on the GMAT in general. So, and that's the importance of what this is all about. Because you can use an approach that will get you the right answer, but it still won't be the best approach. And cognitive flexibility, now your takeaway from this shouldn't be, at least shouldn't be only, oh, I should be using logic and not calculations, because sometimes calculations are more efficient. The main takeaway that I'm trying to impress upon you guys is that we really need to be thinking about how we're going to solve the question before we solve the question. That's A. And B, thinking isn't necessarily enough. We need to get comfortable with these 3 answer strategies: precise, alternative, and logical. Because only once we're comfortable with them can we really make an informed decision about what's going to be the best way for us. Again, for most of us, the precise approach is going to be off the bat, is going to be the most natural one, and we have to really get used to the other ones in order to get to a situation where we can be versatile, which is really the point of cognitive flexibility. So real quick, let's look at an example from the verbal world, because I've only talked about quant so far, but the PAL approach is also applicable for the verbal. So here, again, I want you guys to look at this question. Don't look at the answers. This is an important point. Let's only look at the prompt and the question. And again, I want you guys to think, how should I solve this question? Let's read it. The interview is an essential part of a successful hiring program because with it, job applicants who have personalities that are unsuited to the requirements of the job will be eliminated from consideration. This argument logically depends on which of the following assumptions. Now, don't even read the answers, but rather tell me once again, how do you think we should be solving this verbal question? And again, you can inform me and everyone else with this poll that we have. So I'm just going to give you guys about 20 seconds because I want to hand this off to Doris and Colin in about 10 minutes. But interesting findings so far. Henry is asking, what does alternative mean again? That is a good question because we really haven't talked about alternative yet in detail. Alternative in general as a headline means using shortcuts, basically, getting to the answer without necessarily even knowing how we got there. In the verbal section, this most commonly means looking straight at the answers and eliminating ones that just don't make sense. So let's wrap it up. Oh, I didn't share the results with you. Oh, never mind. I'm sorry. I think I closed the results, but I'll just tell you guys. So most of you guys thought logical was the way to go here as well, and around 2 of you thought alternative was the right way, and 1 or 2 of you were very honest and said, I don't know, which I appreciate. So let's look at it. So actually, Henry, I'm just going to pick up on what I just said to you because it's important. In the verbal section, actually, if I said in the quantitative section that precise is kind of most people's go-to, in the verbal section, it's kind of the reverse. In the verbal section, many of us naturally gravitate towards what I call an alternative approach, which is really looking at the answers, just reading the answers and looking to eliminate the ones that are just weird and just don't make sense. Now, the problem here is, well, there are 2 problems with that. One is that it just takes a long amount of time. Look at the screen right now. The question and the prompt are 3 lines, 3.5 lines, and the answers are another 6 or 7 or 8 lines, and reading the answers is going to double or triple our time. And if we do that for all of the verbal questions, we're going to be in trouble. The other problem is a little bit deeper. The other problem is that the answers in the verbal sections are crafted so as to confuse you. And if we're just reading the answers to eliminate the ones that don't make sense, we're going to run into trouble because in most of these questions there are answers that do make sense. They're just not precisely answering the question we were asked. They're answering maybe something related. So let's talk here about how we can actually use the precise approach. So what does the precise approach mean in the verbal section? Basically, it just means using the information in the question, not looking at the answers, and applying it to answer the question without using any outside information or any outside logic or anything like that, just the information in the question. So what do we have here? What's the information in this question? So basically, let's understand the claim that's at the heart of this question. It's saying the interview is essential. Why? Because it tells us, because is an important word, that it's a connecting word that it indicates what this kind of logical structure of this. So it's essential because it helps us eliminate unsuitable applicants. So what is this going to depend on? I don't know exactly, but it's going to depend on something that has to do with the interviewer's ability to actually eliminate unsuitable applicants, right? Or maybe it's going to tell us that eliminating unsuitable applicants is important, perhaps. But it's definitely going to be something about, if the interview is essential for this reason, it's going to be something about that the interview can actually achieve this. So, and if we look at answer C, that's exactly what it tells us. It tells us interviewers can accurately identify applicants whose personalities are unsuited to the requirements of the job. In other words, the thing that we're being told the interview is essential for is actually a thing that the interview can do. Now, obviously, when we do the precise approach, we do eventually read the answers, but the point is that when we read them, we already know what we're looking for, and that can help us from being thrown off. What do I mean? Well, let's look at answer A, just for example. A hiring program will be successful if it includes interviews. This isn't wrong, right? It's not something that I can read and say this is definitely wrong. It's just not what the question is asking. It's not relevant. It's not a relevant assumption for this claim. Or, for example, E, the fit of a job applicant's personalities to the requirements of the job was once the most important factor in making hiring decisions. Maybe, maybe not. But and the danger is we might read it and kind of get confused and start thinking, did it happen? Did it not happen? And kind of get sidetracked from the fact that it's just not relevant to what you're asked about. So this is an example of how we can use the precise approach in this question. And the alternative approach, again, as I said, will be about going over the answers one by one and eliminating them, which is fine, but it's going to take us more time, probably. So we read A, we say a hiring program will be successful if it includes interviews. But wait a minute, what about if we're told the interview is important because it eliminates unsuitable applicants, and this doesn't tell us anything about the interviews ability to figure out anything about personality. And likewise, we're going to go over the questions one by one and eliminate A, B, D, and E. I'm going to run through this a little bit quickly because I want to touch on one more thing before I hand this off to Colin and Doris, but I hope the broad strokes of what I said are clear. I'm going to try and answer your question in a few minutes, but for now, I'm going to just keep speaking. So up to now, I've talked about cognitive flexibility, which we view here in examPAL as one of the main keys to getting a high score. There's another key that I'm going to talk about very quickly, which we call rapid improvement. And rapid improvement is pretty straightforward, but at the same time not easy. And what it means is the ability to keep improving after you've already learned all the material, which is harder than it sounds, because what we've seen is that a lot of students, they improve a lot at the beginning and then they kind of plateau. They kind of don't keep improving. They solve more and more questions, but they don't improve anymore. And the reason is they've already learned everything. They've already gotten sharp, but now they're not improving. And students that get 700, they can keep improving already at this point. How do we do that? So a few things. One of them has to do with learning from your mistakes, right? A non-700 GMAT scorer gets a question wrong, says bummer, and keeps going. A 700 scorer gets a question wrong, says, great, here's an opportunity to learn. Well, maybe he doesn't say great. I mean, maybe he kicks the table first, but then he says, hold on a second, this is an opportunity. Let's learn from this. What can I improve? Now, what do I mean to be a little bit more specific? So he asks himself, was my problem here something to do with the material? Did I just not know something about this question? Did I forget the formula? If so, I'm going to go back and learn the material. Was it something technical to do with my technique? Did I screw up something in my calculations? If so, I'm going to think how I can adopt some kind of tool to help me avoid making the same mistake twice. And maybe, and here cognitive flexibility comes into play, maybe what I got wrong was I used the wrong answer approach. And if so, I'm going to try and figure out why the answer approach was relevant and how I'm going to identify it next. That's really the important point. What are the cues and the clues in the question that tell me, oh, this is a question in which alternative could work. This is a question in which precise is the way to go. So, and then once you've done that, you seek out similar questions to implement your conclusions. And that is really the two kind of main keys of what we think being a 700 scorer is all about. Now, this doesn't mean, obviously, that all of you are tomorrow going to score 700. What it does mean, though, is that if you guys work on these two key skills, which we very much try to help you do on examPAL, you're going to improve as much as you can. And that's what we believe. Because again, if you just study the GMAT material and solve a lot of questions, that'll take you somewhere relative to where you were at the beginning, but it has a ceiling. But if you keep improving once you've learned the material, and if you continuously ask yourself, what is the most efficient way to solve each question, then you're really developing a skill that can help you achieve your optimal score. So that was my half of our presentation. And again, I want to reiterate our special offer for you guys. If you want to take us up on it, just go to examPAL.com and show us that you signed up for this webinar just through your email, and then you can get 30% off any GMAT course. And I'm just going to try and address Simone Coley's question real quick. In verbal, would you consider precise the same as pre-thinking, not looking at the answers, but first coming up with assumptions before looking at the answers? Yeah, basically I would. In verbal, that's kind of similar to the solution I took there. All right. So that's it. Thank you, guys. You're welcome to ask me questions in the chat. I'll try and answer in writing now for the next half hour. And at the very end, I'll sign on again to say bye to you guys, and I'll try and answer any more questions if you guys have any. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand this off to Doris and Colin.
Thanks, Dave. Hi, guys. I'm going to just be that annoying person and ask all of you as well, if you could just chime in real quick on the chat to make sure that you can hear me. That would be great, just because we're passing the mic around. We're not physically in the same place. One of you just chime in on the chat. I appreciate it. So as Dave mentioned, I'm here with a colleague of mine, Colin. My name is Doris, and the two of us are senior consultants with Admissionado. We are a premier admissions consulting company. We do work with, thanks, Andriana, glad you can hear me. We do work with students who are applying to college, but also young professionals who are applying to business school, and that's obviously why we're here today. So just a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. Starting off with a quick bio of myself, and then I'll hand off to Colin. He and I are going to be tag teaming back and forth. So that'll keep you on your toes, hopefully, and keep you from falling asleep this afternoon, wherever you may be. Again, my name is Doris. I did my undergraduate degree in political science at Harvard, and followed that with a master's degree in Latin American economics from Oxford. Before business school, I spent a very brief stint in management consulting with Oliver Wyman in their London office. And then something that wasn't mentioned here in this bio is I did work in nonprofit for a few years in Mexico City in social entrepreneurship. That's what led me to do my MBA at Wharton. I wanted to get back into the private sector. And when I finished my MBA degree, I went to go work for Godiva, the chocolate company, at their headquarters in New York City. And I was there for a few years. And back in 2016, at this point, I actually left Godiva. I saw an opportunity to get into a combination of real estate and hospitality in Midtown Manhattan. I partnered with an investor, and we are now opening a food hall called the Deco Food and Drink, which should be open later this fall. So come and visit us if you're in New York. Colin, do you want to chime in with your bio?
Absolutely. Hey, guys. This is Colin. I'll be super quick because we don't have a ton of time. I went to Princeton for undergrad, did my degree in anthropology, and immediately after Princeton decided the United States was a very terrible place to be, so I moved to rural China and worked in rural China for what was supposed to be 1 year, but ended up being 4 at a nonprofit called Teach for China. Very similar goal and vision as Teach for America or any of the Teach Fours, Teach for India, Teach First. But after 4 years, decided that was perhaps a long time to be in rural China, and so moved to New York, where I had a brief stint, same with Doris, in management consulting. I worked for a boutique firm that focused mostly on strategy and M&A consulting for large pharmaceutical companies. Decided that was not for me, and so returned to China and actually worked with Admissionado, opening their China offices in Beijing. Went to Booth for my MBA, finished last year, and I'm now at Tesla, where I'm currently running our global sort of purchasing program for plastic resin, which has been very different and very interesting. But I want to talk a little bit about Admissionado. Admissionado is, I think, one of the cooler application consulting shops out there. The people that you're going to work with, or that I get to work with as colleagues, are some of the smartest, coolest, and most interesting people who have crazy, crazy different backgrounds, and therefore approach the work that they do with students from a slightly different angle than a lot of the sort of chop and block places that you could go. A lot of the things that we do stem from individualized consultations with people that start at the free consultation level. We're going to talk a lot more about sort of our approach to things later, but I wanted to first just sort of start off with a plug for what we do and the people that we work with. Obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to type into the box, but if you think of anything later, info@Admissionado is where you can always reach us. And back to you, Doris.
Cool, thanks, Colin. So again, we're just going to pass the baton back and forth here. We are going to focus on 5 different areas of your MBA application right now that we think are extremely important in addition to what Dave already went through. Obviously, we all know you have to get a great GMAT score, and the higher the better. But in addition to that, there's 5 other areas that in our experience and over 10 years of doing this, we think are the most important to business schools. So they're listed here: leadership, international experience, a strong resume, extracurriculars, and LORs is our acronym for letters of recommendation. Now, anyone can tell you this, so what's our unique take on this? Well, we're going to put you in the shoes of an admissions officer of one of these top programs. We're going to try to explain to you why these 5 areas are so important to admissions officers when they're trying to put together the ideal class. Because at the end of the day, their goal, their whole mission as a business school is to safeguard the reputation of their program, to prepare their students to lead and succeed in the world. And that's a virtuous cycle that feeds back into the reputation of the program. It drives more interest, more applicants, and attracts higher quality of cohorts. So that's really what we're going to try to do here with these 5 areas for you. So the first one is leadership, and we're going to use this sort of construct of having 2 fake applicants that we're going to compare back and forth on these 5 dimensions. So let's say, for example, we got candidate 1, Scarlett here. She is an A+ leader, but in all other areas of her application, she's a B-. Let's stack her up against Rabi here. He's the inverse. So he's a B+ leader, good, solid, but not fantastic. And in all other areas of his application, he's A+. Well, the question here is, which of these 2 do you think is more attractive to an admissions officer at a top program? And again, in drawing from our 10 years of experience, it's definitely the first one, Scarlett. And the reason for that is there's been a lot of evidence over the years at these top programs that the stronger the leadership attribute of their class overall, the likelier that class is to go on when they're alumni and once they graduate, the likelier they're to succeed in the world and do well in their professions, also to do well by society, the way they contribute to the world. And so these business schools care a whole lot about leadership. And I'm going to give you an example that I know personally. This is actually one of my classmates from Wharton, and it's going to be an unusual example of leadership. Many of us think, oh, you have to have been, an army captain or leading troops into battle. That's great too, by the way. It's a fantastic way to demonstrate leadership. Or you have to have been, head of a division in a business before you apply. Not necessarily true. So this student at Wharton actually had a degree from an acrobatics school, of all things. Highly unusual, not your typical MBA applicant. However, during his years before business school, he rose through the ranks at Cirque du Soleil and eventually became a creative director for multiple productions. So you can only imagine the many different types of folks who he was leading to put on these very expensive and very impressive events all over the world. So, again, very unusual background, but he ended up going to Wharton and got the attention of McKinsey & Company. Couldn't get more traditional than that. Blue chip firm in management consulting. They were fascinated by his leadership skills that he demonstrated prior to business school. Gave an internship, which he then took the full-time offer to join McKinsey after that. And since then, he's actually left McKinsey. It's been a number of years since we graduated, but he's gone on to found other businesses of his own in this sector, an online contest for performing artists and a consultancy that focuses on entertainment. So again, I wanted to give you guys this example to show you that leadership can be demonstrated in many different ways, but it catches the attention of business schools and also top employers after the fact. Cool. Passing it on to Colin for the next one.
Sweet. So now we're going to talk about another, again, sort of using the construct of 2 applicants side by side, international experience. I think that when I say international experience, I want to make sure that I qualify it. Just because you are not from the United States or have spent your career outside of the United States does not necessarily qualify that experience as international. I think one of the best ways to think about it is if you have had multiple experiences that are, whether professional or personal in nature, outside of your comfort zone, whether it's geographic, whether it's cultural, whether it's personal, that can sort of qualify this international experience bucket. Essentially, when we look at candidate 1, Jude Law, strong jawline, great eyes, also A+ business skills, but no international experience, that can sometimes be, especially when we compare it to Mr. Matty D here, with strong business skills and lots of international experience, a red flag. And when I say red flag, it's not necessarily something that will, break your application or make it, but it will be a factor that business schools will look at pretty closely. I think that if we had all gone to business school like 30 or 40 years ago, the idea that we needed to have international experience sitting on our resume would have been not something that would have had a lot of merit put to it. However, now that the world is more interconnected and we're seeing significantly more people from across the world interested in US business schools, having that exposure to other cultures, other languages, other people, other ways of doing business is super important. And so what does that mean? That means that at the end of the day, Matty D, is going to be much more exciting to the business schools. Why? I mean, let's think about it from the standpoint of an admissions officer. These business schools are some of the top flight places in the world where you're going to meet people who will have impact on you for the rest of your life. And so when we say chemical reactions, it's the idea that you have all of these different backgrounds and experiences who are super smart, super ambitious, and having those people constantly run into each other, sit together in class, work on projects, perhaps, incubate a business idea together, means that you are going to have a much more powerful graduating class, so that, as Doris said, you're perpetuating the strong brand and continuing that flywheel, that virtuous cycle. I think one thing from my own experience that I'd like to bring up is just, we had in my class a ton of people who were excited about starting their own businesses. Some, went to business school with the intention of incubating a business and getting people excited about that. And I think that not many people thought about perhaps leaving the United States and moving to somewhere else. But we had a guy who started a business, and he was Brazilian. He started a business and won I think he won second place in our Venture Challenge Fund competition, and so got funding and ended up starting this business and then getting two people from Booth who were supposed to go on, and I think they were supposed to go to Bain and one was supposed to go to JP Morgan, and they both dropped those offers and went to Brazil. And so I think that those are the reactions that business schools are looking for. And in order to get that, you have to have people that are open to different ideas, to different experiences, and are excited about engaging with different cultures. Just some stats here, and these are sort of mirrored across other business schools as well, especially the Magic 7. But you're going to be looking at sort of an MBA class that is around 25 to 35% international, which means that you're going to have people from all over the world that have incredibly different experiences, whether they're Cirque du Soleil creative directors or whether they've started an incredibly successful nonprofit in Nairobi. And that's something that you should be turning on in your application so that business schools are excited about that. And with that, I'll pass it back to Doris.
Thank you, Colin. So moving on to our third dimension of strong MBA application here, we're going to talk a little bit about your resume. So obviously it goes without saying that the stronger your resume, the better, meaning brand names, whether that's in your educational background or your professional background. Although I have to say there's plenty of folks that I'm sure Colin and I have met in business school who don't come from those name brand universities or those name brand employers. So don't despair if that's the case. We have a slightly different way of looking at resume strength here at Admissionado. So I'm going to compare two superheroes here. We have Batman, who is all about justice. He's fighting the bad guy, right? And then stack up next to him, Superman, who's all about strength. Now, if they both have the same goal, which is justice by any means necessary, which, if you were an admissions officer, had to roll the dice, right? Because you're ultimately making a bet on these two candidates. You don't really know that much about them. Who is the safer bet for the brand of your business school? It's going to be Batman. And why is that? It's because it makes sense. What he says his goal is post-business school, in the rest of his life, the rest of his career, it makes sense because there's a track record in his resume of having done that previously. So even if there's some gaps in his skill levels, even if there's clearly some things he still needs to learn and develop in order to meet those long-term goals, it makes sense. It's this idea of investor risk. So if you had a bet on this company, why would you pick this company over another company? Because you've seen proof that they have what it takes. They have the raw materials. So what we really believe here, look at this last bullet point on the slide here, make the connection of what you have done to what you want to do harmonious. Meaning, even if you want to be a career changer, because we see quite a lot of those clients at Admissionado, is people who want to switch from career A to career B, and they say, well, I don't have experience in my resume to show that I want to be in career B. So long as you can illustrate that you have, there's the breadcrumbs, if you will, the dots that you can connect that show how once you go to business school, you're going to make it in career B, then you're in good shape. Here's an example of a Admissionado client that I actually personally worked with in the past. So prior to business school, his resume was dominated by boutique management consulting, similar to what Colin described in his own past. But he was very interested in moving into entertainment, specifically digital media entertainment. So, you know, we see the rise of Amazon and Netflix and Hulu and companies like this that are marrying data and technology with entertainment content, TV shows and movies. Well, so you said, okay, why would a management consultant, why should we bet on him to go be successful at, let's say, Netflix? Well, it was interesting. In his resume, all of his strongest stories, all the projects that he'd worked on that were most impactful, all had to do with storytelling. It was a common theme that came out when I was listening to him and getting to know his story. And so I said, this is it. Storytelling analytics from your consulting background, that is exactly what a company like Amazon or a company like Hulu is looking for in their MBA grads. And so this student eventually went on to Haas. He was admitted to Booth as well, but he decided to go to Haas, closer to Silicon Valley, and actually spending the summer at McKinsey. That keeps cropping up. So just it goes to show that, you know, if it's going to convince, you know, a top business school, something about your background being really logical, it's probably going to attract the notice of top employers as well. So he's at McKinsey for now, but he's probably going to look into transitioning into the entertainment industry after this. I think that is it for resume strength. So Colin, back to you again.
Hey guys, this is Dave again. Can you guys hear me? Or can you not?
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay, great.
My bad. All right, we're going to back up really quick. All right, LeBron, he's awesome. He has a bunch of things going for him. Member of Finance Club. He was an intern at a startup, won a marketing competition, and ultimately is a badass on the clarinet. Now, if we put him up against LeVar, this is, again, somebody who's super exciting, Finance Club in college, second place in this business contest, and he also loves reading about finance. You already know the answer. LeBron is more exciting. There are a couple of reasons why. One, the biggest one, is that LeBron is a guy who's willing to color outside the lines. He's willing to show that he's passionate and curious about things that are beyond sort of his core competencies. LeVar, obviously super stellar when it comes to finance, but if that's the only thing that he has going for him, then it's not going to be as powerful of an argument for the business school admissions team to say, yes, we believe in you. You're going to be awesome. I think that business schools are looking for those candidates who are willing to explore, beyond sort of what they know and what they're good at, and ultimately to be able to succeed in those things. So LeBron and his clarinet and doing that marketing internship shows this passion for exploration outside. Super sorry about that. My apologies on the mute of myself. And with that, I will pass it back to Doris.
Thank you, Colin. I'm glad you're back. So we are down to the final of our 5 top categories for a well-rounded application. This is the LORs that I mentioned to you before, the letters of recommendation. Again, obviously you need these. These typically come from, usually it's 2, it depends on the school, but oftentimes, you're going to ask 2 different recommenders to write references for you. One typically is your direct supervisor or someone who's been your direct supervisor in the past. The other one's kind of up for grabs. But our main insight onto LORs here, and there's a lot of detail we could get into, but the key takeaway for you guys today is what we call the 70-30 rule. So a lot of clients come to us and say, well, I should probably get, the super senior VP of my division. I've never talked to the guy before, but he's got a really impressive title. And so I should probably try to get this guy to write my recommendation, right? The answer is wrong, unless he knows you very well, unless you worked with him directly, and he can speak to who you are specifically as a candidate and not just say, oh yeah, Doris worked at this company from this year to this year. That's not going to make a compelling LOR because of the 70-30 rule. So the 70% in the 70-30 rule refers to insights that your recommender can provide to the admissions committee that corroborate what's already said in your application. So in your essays, on your resume, for example, we should obviously see some reinforcement. If you say that you led this team to, triple the profits over the last 2 years, your recommender should be able to back you up on that. But there's this 30% that often people forget about, or it doesn't even occur to them to think about this 30%, which is the whole point of admissions officers asking you for recommendations is they want to get other voices in the room besides yours. They want someone else who sees you as an objective third party, as an outsider, to be able to weigh in and say, well, here's why Colin is so great, or here's how Doris is in the top X% of employees that I've ever supervised in my career. So these are things that you yourself may not even be aware of. They're things that your recommenders see about you in the workplace, or again, maybe they can compare you to other young professionals they've worked with over the course of many years. And that's something that admissions officers, they want that extra opinion, that outside perspective on who you are. So the important thing is to pick the right guy or gal who can actually provide this perspective. So again, titles are not that important if they can't actually speak to who you are individually and how you stand out from the crowd. We would rather see any day someone with a lesser title, so to speak, who can actually provide a lot of detail and color about you and your work. And there's a lot of work that we, Colin and I and our fellow consultants do to help guide these recommenders and our clients, to making sure these LORs capture the 70 and the 30 in the 70-30 rule. So that's a whirlwind tour of our philosophy at Admissionado to these different aspects of our application above and beyond the GMAT. Just to recap here, these 5 areas we've been speaking about. What is it that these business schools are looking for? And again, always put yourself in the shoes of the admissions officer and say, okay, if my job is to assemble 800 or 300 or 1,200 of the top future business leaders in the world, if I had to place some bets as to who that group of 800 or 500 or 1,200 are, what am I looking for? Number 1, extracurriculars, well-rounded. I'm looking for evidence of leadership as well in these extracurriculars. Number 2, for LORs, it's the 70-30 rule. Number 3, in your essays, this is mainly where you talk about your resume. So it's essay/resume. You need to demonstrate that what your past experience has been connects logically to what your future goals are. Even if those things are not exactly one and the same, that's okay. Again, we get a lot of career switchers, but they have to be able to see the breadcrumbs, the trail of breadcrumbs in your past experience. What Colin talked about with your work or internship professional experience, we're looking for interesting experiences that are out there or different, and you have an international exposure. And finally, achievements, this goes back to resumes and extracurriculars primarily. Again, we're looking for passion. This is the fire in the DNA. How do you demonstrate that you are someone who's really turned on to life in all the different ways in which you're driven to succeed. And everywhere we look for evidence of leadership. We can't drive that home hard enough. And I think, Colin, let's go back to you, and why don't you wrap it up for us?
Awesome. Thanks. Did not mute myself this time. So I think everyone's probably thinking, all right, what should I be doing now? There are a couple of things that you should be doing. Obviously, make sure that you're taking the GMAT. Get excited about examPAL. Second, make sure that you're lining up your LORs. But most importantly, and this comes far and before everything else, you need to get your argument for why you want to go to business school and why you want to go to that business school and why you want to go right now. You need to get it rock solid before anything else happens. As long as you have that profile strategy set up, as long as you have your understanding of what you're going to be doing and your rationale for why you're going to be doing it, you're going to be rock solid. But you got to get that done first. So I think in terms of practical stuff, we're nearing round one, and I think that it's super helpful for you guys to start pushing things out for that. Maybe it's a program that you're not super pumped about. Maybe it's a program that you'll do okay with, but it's not something you're super tied to. Get something out for round one. There are a couple of things that are really important here. First, it's just an experience. Putting everything down on paper, working through it, getting your recommenders and all of your stuff in your resume in order is just something that will pay off dividends for all the other programs you might be applying to in round two. Two, it gives you practice to understand where things might be falling apart. I think that not doing it or just sort of saying, all right, I'm going to wait for round two to sort of happen before I understand where my weaknesses are is a bad strategy. I think that, there's no loss to apply to round one, even if it's something that you're not 100% proud of. As long as you've got that experience under your belt, by the time round two rolls around, you're going to be in a much better place. I think that obviously some of you might be not applying this year. And if you're going to be applying in 2020 or maybe even in 2021, as you get started on that path to the application process, the things that we talked about today should be your North Stars. Think about your background, think about how your background's connecting to why you want to go to business school and what you want to pitch as your future after business school. And make that sort of your lodestone for how you make career decisions, maybe how you are thinking about your time outside of work. Maybe even sort of, if you're thinking about changing careers, think about how that's going to be related to this application you're going to be pursuing in 1 or 2 or maybe a couple of years' time. And with that, we have like 3 minutes left, and I'm so sorry about the audio misfire earlier. We'll take some questions. If anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in to the chat portal.
And this can be questions, guys, for Dave on GMAT, for examPAL, or for myself or Colin. Don't be shy if you've got any. Otherwise, you do have our contact info. Feel free to drop us a line there if you'd like.
Yep, I'm here too. You guys have any questions?
So, Dave, I think there's one for you. How important is the GMAT score?
I guess how important is primarily an admissions score, I believe. It's very important, right, Doris and Colin?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in my experience, I can speak, and Colin, I'm curious what you have to say about this. I'm guessing it's similar. The GMAT can be sort of a bit of a litmus test. So, if you're applying to Stanford and you have a 500 GMAT score, you got some proving to do, right? You have to, it's not impossible to get in with that score to a program like Stanford. Just means there's got to be a lot of other stuff going for you. And that's where these other 5 areas come into play. Now, if you're applying to Stanford and you have a 770, that's awesome. You kind of pass that litmus test, but then you still have, you still have to demonstrate why you're going to be such a great alumnus for Stanford someday. So it's I don't know how else to say it definitely, at a quick glance, it's a way for admissions officers to quickly gauge where you are, but then it's just part of the equation.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. Full disclosure, I actually took the GRE. I did not take it. And I think for GMAT, there are 2 things that are important. One, it's a future indicator of academic potential. Or it's an indicator of academic potential, I should say, not future indicator. And then second, also for some schools, be a determining factor for scholarships. So having a great GMAT score is super important if you're looking to defray the cost of business school. Oftentimes, it can be the difference between one applicant getting a scholarship or one scholarship and another not. So I would take it super serious. Make sure that you're studying, and obviously it's not the end of the world, like a 780 or a 750, but definitely put in your role. Yeah, no problem, Simone.
Any other questions, guys?
Awesome. Well, if no other, maybe there is one more. Yeah. Okay. Sweet. Well, if no other questions, hit us up at admissionado.com. Free consultations are exactly that. They're just free. And if you have any questions about the process or anything else, info at Admissionado is where you can reach us. Thank you guys so much for coming today, and hopefully we'll see some of you guys reach out.
Yeah, thank you guys for me as well. I had a good time, and I just want to mention one last thing. If you go to examPAL.com at any point, even without signing up for anything, we have a question bubble kind of in the right corner, and at any point you can just sign on, go to the site and ask questions, and we'll answer them. You can tell them that you were in this webinar, and I'll know who you were. So I hope to see you guys there. Thank you guys very much for being with us this hour. Thank you to Colin and Doris very much. I learned a lot.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Colin. Thank you guys all for your time. Really appreciate it. Good luck to you all.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
All right. Good luck, guys.